What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you my spring football power rankings for the ACC for the upcoming 2025 college football season. I gave you my power rankings for the other Power 4 conferences in the Big 12, the Big 10, and the SEC in the last 3 days. Now we're on our last Power 4 conference. If you have not seen the other Power 4 conference for the power rankings for the spring football season, be sure to go back and check that out right here on the channel. Now we're closing things out with the ACC before we get into our actual predictions and finish up spring football. We got my predictions coming up sometime in the month of May, so stay tuned for that coming out. But let's go ahead and jump right into these power rankings for spring football for the ACC. And again, we'll start from the bottom and work our way down to the top. So starting with number 17, that's going to be Stanford. Nothing too exciting to get here if you're a Stanford fan. It's a new era once again here for this football program. Stanford's been like the worst team in the Power 4 and definitely / Power 5 if you go back to where we used to have Power 5 conferences and you go back to their days in the Pac-12. They have just not been good as a program as of late. You look at this offense, they're going to lose their top wide receiver last year, and Alec Odemeyer, I guess that's how you pronounce his name. That's a big, that's a big receiver that they lost there from last year. But you look at this overall talent. There's just no talent whatsoever. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to be terrible or anything like that, but they just have a pretty tough schedule, and the talent is just not there for them. They don't have any talent whatsoever. The depth does concern me about this team. Just not a ton of depth. Now, their starting lineup may be really good, but their, depth and everything is just not overall that impressive. So, yeah, Stanford, nothing too exciting to get here for Stanford for 2025, and that's the reason why they're at number 17 in these power rankings. Now, they were not the worst team in the ACC from last year. They were pretty lucky that Florida State was absolutely terrible, but Stanford, I think they're definitely going to be at the bottom of the conference this year. Just no talent whatsoever, and I think Florida State might turn things around in 2025. So Stanford at number 17. Moving on to number 16, we got Wake Forest. Wake Forest, this is a team that also has kind of been up and down in the last couple years. The last couple years, they have not been the same program as they used to be. Ever since 2021, that when they went to the ACC championship, it's just been pretty up and down for the Demon Dinkins. You look at this offense, the offensive line definitely kind of concerns me. They don't really have a ton of depth there. They do bring in a transfer quarterback in Robbie Ashford, but how good is he going to be? I mean, I think he'll be pretty average and everything. That's all I can say really about this quarterback for Wake Forest. Defensively, the linebacker and the secondary, there's just not a ton of depth there on the secondary and the linebacker for Wake Forest, so that's kind of the reason why I got Wake Forest here down at the bottom as well, is because of the depth on this team. And also, I mean, they're probably more talented than Stanford is, but they're kind of just average in the middle. So yeah, Wake Forest at number 16. The reason why they're here at the bottom of these power rankings is definitely the depth on this team on the offensive line, and then also the linebacker in the secondary. So Wake Forest at number 16. Moving on to number 15, that's Virginia. The Cavaliers, coming off a pretty average season last year, they were actually quite a little bit better they've been in the last few years, but they also have kind of been the worst team in the ACC over the few years as well. You look at this offense, they lose quite a bit on that side of the football from last year. They do got a transfer quarterback in Chandler Morris coming in, but they don't really have a ton of depth at that quarterback position, and that really definitely does worry me if I'm the Cavaliers here for Virginia. I think Chandler Morris is a pretty good quarterback, but if he doesn't stay healthy, what's going to happen here for Virginia for the rest of the year? Yeah, that's definitely going to be a big issue there that they'll definitely have to correct. If both quarterbacks get injured, they're not going to have a ton of depth there on that quarterback position. They lost Kobe Pace at running back. I mean, that's a big loss there on the running back position. The tight end concern is a little bit, a concern there for Virginia as well. They don't really have a ton of depth there. And the offensive line is a little bit of a concern as well. They don't really have a ton of depth there either. So, yeah, overall this offense for Virginia, I don't think it's going to be bad, but you just look at the depth on this team. Not a ton of depth there, and that's kind of why Virginia's at the bottom of these power rankings at number 15. Defensively, there's not a lot of depth there on the defensive side of the football. They lost Jonas Sanker, a pretty talented full safety there. So, yeah, Virginia definitely has a lot of issues that they'll definitely need to correct, especially the depth on this team. So, yeah, Virginia at number 15. Moving on to number 14, we got Cal. This is a team that's coming off a pretty solid year in their first year in the ACC in 2024. You look at this offense, they have a transfer quarterback coming in Devin Brown because they lost their quarterback due to the transfer portal going to Indiana and everything. But you look at this offense, I think they're actually going to be pretty solid. I don't think they're going to be decent or even great or anything like that, but I think the Cal Golden Bears definitely have a chance to be a pretty solid offense. They don't really lose quite a lot there from last year. So Cal, their offense, I think, can definitely make some jump this year in 2025, but you look at this defense, that is definitely the big concern, and that's why I do have Cal here back at the bottom of these power rankings at number 14. The secondary, they have a lot of concerns there in the depth, and then lost Xavier Carlton. They also lost Teddy Buchanan at linebacker, and they lost some pretty good players in the secondary. They lost Marcus Harris, Craig Woodson, and then Noel Williams in the secondary, so yeah, I have a ton of concerns there about the defense. Not a lot of depth on the secondary especially. I think the linebacker position is going to be fine, but the secondary is definitely a concern here for Cal. Just not a ton of depth there, and that's kind of what's keeping them here outside of the top 10 and definitely here at number 14 in these power rankings. Moving on to number 13, we got NC State. The Wolfpack had a pretty up and down season last year, just going 6-6. They still made it to a bowl game, but this NC State team, you kind of expect them to reload every year, especially on both sides of the football. Both sides of the football look like they're going to be pretty solid for the Wolfpack, and they don't really lose a ton there from last year, so I think NC State, they're definitely outside the top 10 because of the lack of talent on this team, but they're well coached, and they definitely should be able to make it to a bowl game. And this is also a team that's one of the more consistent programs in this conference. So, yeah, NC State definitely probably should be right there near a bowl game, like 6, 7, 8 wins. The only thing that NC State can really do this year is be a surprise team, and that surprise team, it's not really making them to a bowl game. The surprise team that I think we can see from NC State this year is definitely be a dark horse team in this conference, and then definitely a top contender as well. But as of right now, I got the Wolfpack here at number 13. They got a ton of depth on their team, so I do like the solidness of this team. They should be pretty solid on both sides of the football, and that's why they're here at number 13. Moving on to number 12, Boston College. This is a team that's coming off a pretty surprising year last year. Last year, they had a first-year head coach. You look at this offense, definitely a lot of concerns at the quarterback position. They don't really have a ton of depth there because they lost Trayshawn Ward at quarterback, a very good quarterback there from last year that ran the football pretty well. Defensively, they didn't really lose a lot there, but they lost their star defensive end in Donovan Edzurke. I saw him got drafted the other night last week in the NFL draft. Yeah, that's a pretty good player there, but kind of like NC State, you kind of expect Boston College to be a pretty solid team. I don't know if they'll be quite as good as they were from last year on offense, but still, this is a Boston College team that definitely should be pretty solid. They could be right there around 6 or 7 wins. I think 8 wins would definitely be a surprise team, in my opinion, for Boston College. But as of right now, I got this team at number 12. Again, the quarterback position, there's not really a ton of depth there because what if their quarterback definitely gets hurt this year, and then another quarterback gets hurt? That's definitely going to be an issue that Boston College needs to correct. But I got the Eagles at number 12. Number 11 is Syracuse. I think this is going to be quite a bit of a step back here for Syracuse for 2025. Don't know about being a big step back. I mean, they do have a tough schedule this year, and that's kind of why they're pretty low in these power rankings, is because of the schedule. But they lost quite a bit on offense last year. They lost Kyle McCord, of course, at quarterback. I mean, that's definitely going to be a concern, in my opinion, is the depth of the quarterback position. They just don't really have a ton of guys there and a ton of options at quarterback. And Kyle McCord was really great for Syracuse last year. He threw about 3,000 passing yards, and I don't understand why he was not in the Heisman conversation. But you do bring in the Ricky Collins at transfer at quarterback. They lost Laquan Allen at running back. That's a big loss there at that running back position. And then they lost Aronde Goddison at tight end. I guess that's how you pronounce his name. So yeah, some big losses there on the offensive side of the football. The defense, really the only thing that's concerning me is the secondary. Not a ton of depth there in the secondary here for Syracuse for 2025. And I think that's the reason why Syracuse could have a big step back of a year. I mean, I don't really know if it will be a big step back or just a little bit of a step back, but I don't think it's going to be a Syracuse Syracuse team that's going to win 10 games this year, in my opinion. But I got Syracuse at number 11 just because of the losses on offense, and definitely the secondary is a concern here for the Orange for 2025. Moving on to the top 10 now. At number 10, I got Virginia Tech. This is a team that was one of the most experienced teams in the ACC from last year. They were expected to make a jump last season, but that did not happen. They were kind of a disappointing year, and it really all started because of that Vanderbilt game. But offensively, it looks solid for them. You know, K'Ron Jones is returning at quarterback. I guess that's how you pronounce his first name, K'Ron Jones, or Drones, I should say. Yeah, he's returning at quarterback. That's a big return. But at running back, they lost Brayshaw Tootin at running back. That's a pretty big loss there for the Hokies. But everywhere else looks really solid for Virginia Tech on offense. I mean, they got a ton of depth, and that's really good news. And it's not one of the most talented rosters, but it's definitely one of the most consistent rosters in the ACC. So, yeah, I got Virginia Tech here at number 10 because of that. You look at the defense, they lost some really good players on defense. You know, they lost like 2-star defensive linemen, but they lost Dorian Strong in the secondary at corner. But everywhere else looks pretty solid on defense. Again, they have a ton of depth on this team, so that's the reason why I got Virginia Tech here at number 10. I don't know if they'll be like a dark horse contender in this conference or not, but as of right now, they are at number 10 because of the players that they return, and then also they have a ton of depth here on both sides of the football. Moving on to number 9, we got North Carolina. Obviously, a lot of hype for this team with Bill Belichick coming in as the head coach. Obviously, it's going to be a lot of new players, a lot of transfers stepping in, especially on the offensive side of the football. They added some pieces in the transfer portal on offense more than they did the defense. You look at the quarterback position, though, that's definitely a concern in my opinion. Not a ton of options there at quarterback. I'm kind of surprised they didn't get like more quarterbacks, to be honest, but the Tar Heels probably should be fine on the offensive side of the football. But you look at the loss of Amarian Hampton at running back. That's definitely a big concern there if you're North Carolina, but they do got options at running back as well. But again, just a lot of transfers on this team on the offensive side of the football. And then you look at the defense. The depth does concern me about the Tar Heels on defense. They didn't really add a ton there in the transfer portal on defense. I mean, they added some. Yeah, that's good news, but they didn't add a lot. So, yeah, North Carolina here at number 9 because of the offense. They brought in the transfers and everything. That's pretty much the reason why they're inside the top 10. But they're out of the top 5 just because, the depth on the defense and everything. And I know a lot of people saying that North Carolina is going to be like a top 25 team. They could, but I don't really want to go too far yet with the Tar Heels for 2025. And I kind of been saying that ever since the month of January. But I got North Carolina here at number 9. Moving on to number 8, and that is Florida State. I think Florida State definitely should be able to turn things around in 2025. It was definitely a very terrible season for them and definitely a disappointing year in 2024. I picked this team to go to the ACC championship last year and then also the college football playoff. I don't know if I'll do that same thing again, but you look at this offense. They bring in the transfer quarterback in Tommy Castolas. He's definitely probably going to be a little bit of an upgrade in that passing game for them. DJ Uiagalelei definitely was not a really big upgrade in that passing game, and that was definitely the weakness of this Florida State offense. You look at the defense, though. A lot of depth on that defense. They don't really lose a lot there from last year, but, they lose quite a bit on both sides of the football. But this is a team that does reload in the transfer portal. Mike Norvell knows how to get it done in the transfer portal, and I do expect Florida State to turn things around in 2025. But again, they're outside the top 5. I just don't know if they can become like a top contender, though. So as of right now, they probably will be a dark horse contender in this conference. Moving on to number 7, we got Pittsburgh. Pretty solid year for Pittsburgh last year. This team got off to like a 7-0 start, but then they kind of, slipped up in the late part of the season. But you look at this Pittsburgh team, offensive line is a little bit of a concern. They don't really have a ton of depth on that offensive line, but everywhere else looks pretty good for them on the offensive side of the football. They do return their starting quarterback from last year, so that's good news there for the Panthers. Defensively, I think this defense actually has a chance to be pretty decent. It's not going to be the most talented defenses in the country and definitely in this conference, but it definitely is a defense that can get off the field on third downs. So, yeah, Pittsburgh here at number 7 because because of that. They do return a lot on the defensive side of the football. So, yeah, that might be the strength of this team. It really does come down to that offense for 2025. But, yeah, Pittsburgh, they do have a chance to have a pretty big jump this year, and that's why I got them here at number 7. They could also be like a dark horse team in the ACC. Moving on to number 6, we got the Duke Blue Devils. The Blue Devils last year coming off a really big surprising season under first-year head coach Manny Diaz. This team won 9 games last year in Manny Diaz's first year, and we're kind of expecting the defense to be really good because of Manny Diaz's defensive background. You look at that defense, it's going to be pretty decent on that side of the football. They have a lot coming back on defense. Again, it's not one of the most talented defenses in the country, but it definitely probably could be a really good defense in the ACC. I mean, offensively, not a lot of weaknesses there except for the offensive line. A little bit of depth concerns on the offensive line, but everywhere else looks pretty good. They also bring in the transfer quarterback and also Darian Messiah. Actually, I should say the depth of the offensive line is a concern, but you look at the defense, I think they're going to be pretty decent. But they do bring in Darian Messiah, the transfer quarterback from Tulane, after their quarterback from last year left to go to the transfer portal. So yeah, not a ton of weaknesses here for this Duke team. Really, what keeps them outside the top 5 is probably because of the lack of talent on this team, but this is a team that was so competitive last year against some of the top teams in the ACC. I wouldn't be surprised if the Blue Devils do become a dark horse team in this conference, and I also wouldn't be surprised. Maybe they could become a top contender, but I don't really want to go too far with the Blue Devils. They could definitely be a top 25 team, though, and that's kind of what is putting them here inside the top 10 is because they could be a top 25 team. But as of right now, they're at number 6 here in these power rankings, but that's pretty high here if you're a Blue Devils fan. Moving on to number 5, Georgia Tech. I know a lot of people are not going to agree with this, but I do like this Georgia Tech team a lot. First off, Haynes King is back at quarterback. They got a pretty good chunk of depth there on the offensive side of the football, but the offensive line, they don't really have a ton of depth there, so maybe that's probably the weakness for this Georgia Tech offense is the offensive line. But we saw how good Haynes King was at quarterback last year at running the football, and that's the thing about this Georgia Tech team. They can run the football pretty well, and they do have some options there at running back as well. Defensively, I think they're going to be pretty decent. I mean, I think that's going to be the strength here of this Georgia Tech defense. The defensive line was pretty good for them last year. The secondary, it wasn't the best secondary in the country, but it definitely got better and better as the season goes along. And overall, they have a ton of production coming back. They also added some additions in the transfer portal. So yeah, I do like this Georgia Tech team a lot. Do they become a top contender in the ACC because of this? No, but they do have a chance to probably be a dark horse team in this conference. And again, we saw how competitive Georgia Tech was. Even as a 7-5 team or a 6-6 team, they were competitive against some of the top teams in the country. Like, for example, Georgia, and then also they beat Miami last year. So yeah, Georgia Tech, this is going to be a sneaky good team in the ACC in my opinion. So keep an eye on this team. They're at number 5 here in these power rankings. Number 4 is the Louisville Cardinals. The Cardinals, once again, pretty much they will reload on both sides of the football. I mean, last year they lost Tyler Shuck at quarterback, but they do bring in Miller Moss, the transfer from USC. I think he's going to be, pretty much fit well into this system. He's not going to be really a good quarterback for them, pretty solid for them, I should say. Maybe a good quarterback is what I should say for, Miller Moss. I mean, he does have a lot of experience, but again, Louisville does reload every year in the transfer portal, and that's kind of the reason why they're in the top 5 every year because of that. Again, they lose quite a bit of talent from last year. They also lost a pretty star receiver in Ja'Cory Brooks at wide receiver. Yeah, that's a big loss there for Louisville, but either way, I think this Louisville team actually is going to be pretty decent, especially on both sides of the football. But you look at the defense, I mean, the depth concerns at linebacker, that's pretty much the only concern I have for Louisville as far as the defense for the Cardinals. They don't really have a ton of depth there at that linebacker spot, but they lost a couple of really good players. Lost Ashton Gillety at defensive end, and then they lost Quincy Riley, but that's about it. So yeah, Louisville definitely will reload in the transfer portal again, and because of that, the additions in the transfer portal that Jeff Brom added, that's why Louisville here is at number 4, and this definitely is a top 25 team, and then also a contender for the ACC title this year. Moving on to number 3, we got SMU, of course, the team that that made it to the ACC championship last year and then also made it to the playoff. Kevin Jennings is back at quarterback. I don't really see a lot of concerns about this offense for SMU. They lost Brashard Smith at running back, but they got plenty of options there at the running back spot. The wide receivers look really good for SMU. You look at this defense. The secondary, that's pretty much the only concern I have for SMU on defense. I think the defensive line and the linebacker positions are going to be pretty strong for them. They lost some key players there in the secondary, but I think SMU overall should be like another decent team. This SMU team, again, I think should make a big jump here in the ACC once again in their second year, and they kind of proved to us last year that they definitely belong in this conference, so definitely keep an eye on SMU here at number 3, but big reason why they're in the top 3 is because of Kevin Jennings coming back at quarterback. Moving on to number 2, we got Miami. I think it's really all about Carson Beck. I think it's really going to be all about Carson Beck in this passing game and this whole entire offense. Defensively, they have a lot to improve, though. The defense wasn't really the best last year. It was like good at times and then sometimes bad at times, if that makes sense. But yeah, Carson Beck, it's really all about him in this passing game. Can he do what Cam Ward did a little bit from last year and definitely make this offense explosive? I mean, I think they can. I mean, the talent is there for Miami. It's really about how they play in their games. I mean, at times last year they had some games where they, in the first half they were close with, some of these teams, and then second half they will pull away. Well, that same thing happened again. I really don't know. This is kind of a different Miami team with Carson Beck at quarterback now. But yeah, Carson Beck, we're kind of expecting him to improve a lot this year. I mean, last year couldn't really take care of the football at Georgia. We'll see how well he fits into the system here for the Hurricanes. But the talent is there for Miami. This is a very talented team, especially on both sides of the football. They brought in another really good recruiting class, and they also added some additions in the transfer portal. So once again, Miami should become a contender in the ACC and definitely have a chance to make it to the ACC championship. They didn't do that last year, and they also didn't make the playoff, but they could definitely do that this time here in 2025. But number 1 for me is definitely Clemson. I think Clemson, as of right now, is a pretty heavy favorite in this conference and definitely has a chance to win it pretty easily. I mean, look at all the talent on this team and also the experience. That's what Clemson's got this year, is the experience and everything. They also have the talent on this team. This might be the most veteran Clemson team that Dabo Swinney has had during his time here for the Tigers, but K. Klubnik back at quarterback. You like this offense to be very explosive once again in 2025 under Garrett Riley as the offensive coordinator. I mean, they have a ton of experience. That's all I can really say about Clemson, and they do have talent, and they also added some additions in the transfer portal. That's what really made Clemson definitely a big top contender in this conference, is because of the transfer portal. They were not using the transfer portal a lot over the years, but they now finally used it, and they added some weapons there in the transfer portal. So I do like this offense. It should be pretty explosive like it was last year, and I do expect K. Klubnik to probably be a Heisman candidate. You never know. Defensively, this team also looks pretty strong. They added some additions in the transfer portal there, and then you also got Tom Allen coming in, the defensive coordinator from Penn State. So yeah, this is going to be a pretty dominant Clemson team, and I think this is the team that you're going to have to beat here in the ACC. If you're those other teams here in this conference, Clemson is the team to beat in this conference, and I think as of right now, they are definitely the favorite to win this conference, and they definitely have a chance to make a run to the college football playoff. And you never know, they could probably win a national championship with this year with all this talent, and then also with the overall experience on this team. So Clemson at number 1 in these spring football power rankings. Those are my official spring football power rankings here for this conference for the ACC for the upcoming 2025 college football season. Do you guys agree or disagree with these spring football power rankings? Give me your spring football power rankings for this conference down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.